The wedding breakfast was underway at the Gilded Swan, Mayfair's most exclusive and notoriously expensive venue. The groom's mother, Lady Eleanor Chadwick, had personally approved every canopy, selected the specific breed of roses for the centerpieces, and dictated the shade of the napkins. It was, of course, entirely her purview. A formidable woman, dripping in inherited diamonds, with a stare that could silence a boardroom. The bride came from decidedly less illustrious stock. Charlotte was 26. Her father, Arthur Pendleton, was a quiet, retired librarian. He had gentle, paper-creased hands, a tweed jacket that was decades old but meticulously kept, and a tendency to study the parquet floor when overwhelmed. One might have hoped for a better connection for the family, Lady Eleanor had sighed to her cousin. But Jane's is stubborn. The girl is polite. Biddable. But her father, good Lord. He's like a character from a provincial novel. The Chadwicks owned vast holdings in commercial property. The groom's side of the room was a sea of ascot hats and Seville row tailoring, a confident, braying crowd with plumbing accents and expansive gestures. Charlotte's contingent was small, a few elderly relatives from Dorset, 2 university friends, the neighbor from her flat, and Sophie, who had helped pin Charlotte's veil. Arthur Pendleton sat at the far end of their table, nearly obscured by a floral arrangement. He wore a new, slightly ill-fitting charcoal suit. His tie had been askew, and Charlotte had straightened it, her fingers trembling, just before they processed in. "Father, you're ice-cold," she had whispered. "All is well, my dear." "All will be well," he had assured her, his voice barely audible over the string quartet. In his speech, the groom's father, Sir Alistair Chadwick, spoke of his son James's choice with a kind of bemused affection, the adjective unassuming applied to Charlotte carrying a whiff of condescension. Polite applause rippled through the room. Sir Alistair then presented a heavy, cream vellum envelope. Its substantial weight hinted at the contents, likely a cheque for a deposit on a respectable townhouse. "And now, a gift from the bride's father," boomed the master of ceremonies, a faint, questioning lilt betraying his professional polish. A subtle wave of curiosity, tinged with pity, passed over the Chadwicks' guests. What on earth could he offer? Arthur Pendleton rose. He seemed slight under the glittering chandeliers. In his hands was not a velvet box, but a plain, A4 manila envelope. He extended it, his voice reedy but distinct in the sudden quiet. "For you, Charlotte. And for you, Sir Alistair." A few muffled titters came from the groom's friends. Probably a first edition of some dreadful poetry, they thought. Charlotte, long accustomed to buffering her bookish father from society's subtle cruelties, took the envelope with a strained, gracious smile, ready to absorb any slight on his behalf. Inside was a sheaf of papers, neatly hole-punched and bound. Charlotte began to read the covering page. Her serene, bridal composure held for a moment. Then, her eyes froze. They widened, the carefully applied mascara suddenly stark against her blanched cheeks. She drew a sharp breath, and Aunt Agnes reached for her smelling salts, assuming a faint. Charlotte finished the summary, her gaze flying up to lock with her father's. He met it not with victory, but with a deep, exhausted serenity, the serenity of a man who has finally balanced the books of a terrible, long-held debt. "Papa." It was a choked whisper. "Papa, can this be true?" "It is merely fact, my love." Frowning, Sir Alistair snatched the documents from her. His jovial, patrician expression stiffened into confusion, then crumbled into dawning horror. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty gray. The top sheet was a formal letter from a firm of forensic accountants and solicitors, acting on instructions and referencing a Crown Prosecution Service case file. It detailed a business partnership from 25 years prior. Arthur and Alistair had been friends at Oxford and later co-founded a niche antiquarian bookseller. Arthur, the bibliophile with a genius for authentication, Alistair, the charming frontman with a taste for the high life. They secured a monumental deal with an American collector. Alistair wanted to sell several enhanced provenance documents to inflate the prices. Arthur refused, citing integrity and the law. So, Alistair engineered a ruin. He forged Arthur's signature on loan agreements and siphoned funds, making it appear Arthur had embezzled and fled. Arthur arrived at their Bloomsbury shop to find bailiffs changing the locks and allegations of fraud. He fought, engaged a solicitor, but Alastair had already wine and dined the right contacts, called in the right favors. The litigation bankrupted Arthur and shattered his reputation. His wife, Margaret, retreated under the weight of the scandal. A quiet depression took hold, and a swift, aggressive illness went untreated. She was gone within 18 months, leaving 5-year-old Charlotte motherless. Arthur did not break. He withdrew, took a modest job in a public library, and raised his daughter. For a quarter of a century, he said nothing. But he had been archiving. Signed testimonies from former apprentices, bank records he had meticulously requested each year, the original forged ledger pages he had secretly photocopied, dated journal entries detailing his protests. All of it was now compiled in a devastating dossier. The case had been referred to the authorities 8 months ago. Charlotte knew nothing. The covering letter stated it clearly: forgery, fraud by false representation, conspiracy to defraud. The passage of time was no barrier due to the discovery of new and compelling evidence. The sums involved guaranteed a substantial custodial sentence. "You?" Alastair hissed, staggering upright, his chair toppling backwards with a crash. His face was now puce with fury. "You pathetic little man. I will ruin you. I will have you crushed." Arthur Pendleton did not flinch. He merely stood, a slender figure in his off-the-rack suit, an immovable monument to quiet resolve. "I was not idle, Alastair. I was patient. They are not the same. You attempted to ruin me once before," Arthur continued, his voice acquiring a flinty edge. "You took my business, my good name, my wife's peace. I held Charlotte's hand at the graveside when she asked why Mummy wouldn't wake up. And I had no answer that would fit in your world of lies." His voice remained steady, but a lifetime of solitary grief shone in his eyes. "Did you imagine I had forgotten? Did you presume I had forgiven? No, Alastair. I merely understood the value of time. Life taught me that every debt, eventually, falls due.